This video is going to cover the topic of gathering data from notes. Be sure the date and topic are at the top of your page. The essential question for the video is how can we interpret narrative notes in order to make a table and a graph? We have worked a bit with tables and graphs. We have seen that we can find the story a graph tells us by looking for clues, but now we're going to go in a reverse order. Now we are going to go in the reverse order. We're going to use the story to make a table, and later from that, a graph. We'll do one together. Then I will leave you with a set of notes to create a graph, and you will need to bring your graph with you to class for discussion. Here are some notes about the time and temperature during a bike ride. We're going to use these notes to help us figure out what happened and to create a table. When I look over the information in these notes, I can tell that I'm looking at two variables, the time of day and the temperature. So I've created a quick table that will let me fill in information as I find it. The first thing I see is that the ride started at 8 a.m. and if I read all the way through, I can see that it ends at 4. So I know that it's going to start at 8 and go to 4 for the time. I'll fill that in on my table. Unfortunately, this doesn't actually tell me what the temperature is, but I know that it says it's quite warm. I'll have to figure out what that means as I look through it. As I go to the next piece of information, though, I see that the temperature drops to 63, and that happens at about mid-morning. So if we consider mid-morning maybe 10 o'clock, I can go ahead and put that 63 degrees, was the temperature at mid-morning, and it stayed there while it was thunderstorming for about an hour. So from 10 to 11, I'm going to keep that 63 degrees. So I already have some information filled in. From there I can see that the storm ended and there was a warm breeze, so my guess is the temperature went up a little bit, but I'm going to come back to that. I'm just going to keep reading and see if there's any more specific information. It says as the day went on, the sun went steadily warm, and they reached their campground at our 4 p.m. time, and it was 89 degrees. So that's another piece of information that we know. So I have some basic information. I'm going to try to piece in the rest of it. I won't actually know the exact temperatures, but I'll just have to estimate and see what makes sense. Since I know from the beginning that the temperature dropped to hit the storm of 63 and it dropped quickly and suddenly, my guess is that it was probably in the 70s sometime at the start of the day. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in a number that makes sense. 89 is the high, so I don't want to get that close. Maybe I'll just say that it was maybe 76 or 77 before the storm hit. And then the storm hit and it dropped down to 63. After the storm ended, it warmed back up, so it probably got pretty close to, or maybe more than, what it was before the storm. So maybe it went back up to approximately 78, right? We're just sort of making some estimates. And then I know that it steadily went up from here all the way to the end of the day. So it didn't go up any big jumps. Maybe it went up 2 or 3 degrees each time, because it went up a total of 11 degrees in all that time. So maybe it goes up 2 degrees here, and then another maybe 3 degrees, another 3 degrees, until it hits 89. And that's it. I've taken what I was able to out of the story and put it into a table that roughly shows the same information. And from that, I can now make a graph. So I'm going to go ahead and flip mine to make a graph. As I'm setting up my graph here, you might notice that this looks a little different because I don't have a 0, 0 origin. I've decided to use the variable time of day instead of time in hours, and it's starting at 8 a.m. for the ride. So I actually have 8 right there on the corner where the origin would be. I know from the data I created, my temperature ranges from 63 to 89. So I think I'm going to count by tens in order to be able to account for all of that. And with that, all I need to do is plot the points that I created from my table as best I can, knowing of course that some of them won't be perfectly on a line, so I might need to kind of estimate where they belong. I'm going to go ahead and fill mine in as you do the same. And since the temperature is pretty constantly changing, I can go ahead and connect those lines to be able to see the trend that I've created. And there we have it. Right? I created a graph out of the data from some narrative notes that I had. So your job now is to bring a graph to class that shows the information from the story I'm about to share. So this represents day 3, actually, of our bike ride, right? Wherein one of the students recorded some data. I think it was Malcolm and Tony recorded some data. And you can also find this on page 14 of your journal if you want to take a look at it in your book. Or excuse me, in your book, not your journal. And I'd like you to create a graph and a table. I usually start by making the table first and then making a graph after that. And I want you to do a table and graph that you think best matches this. And you don't, of course, need to write down the whole story, but you do want to make sure that you have a chance to look through all of the pieces of information and pull out the important things, like where they started, how long they were there, how many miles they took, and when they might have been going faster and slower. So bring in what you can. Tomorrow, we're going to share out some of the information that we come up with. And remember, the essential question of this video was, how can we interpret narratives to make a table and a graph of data? And as you can see from our example, it's hard to have exact information, but we can get a lot out of the information that we have if we look hard enough. So I look forward to seeing these tables and graphs tomorrow.